Elijah Brooks' old pickup truck slowed down as it entered the main street of Millbrook. This quiet 47-year-old man sat behind the wheel, trying to see the sun filtering through his messy hair. Beside him, Shadow, a black and grey German shepherd, stretched out on the back seat, opened his eyes and scanned the surroundings. Millbrook was a typical lost town in the American Midwest. Nostalgic shops lined the main street, children played in the Central Park, and there was that peaceful atmosphere where everyone knew each other. Elijah loved places like this, away from the chaos of big cities, quiet and peaceful. "We're just going to get gas and leave, Shadow," he said to his dog, his voice weary. "We have a long road ahead of us." Shadow listened, but his eyes were elsewhere. He sensed something. Elijah parked at the gas station. As he walked inside, the old man behind the counter, around 60 years old with snow-white hair, eyed him up and down. His gaze lingered on Elijah's army pants and leather jacket. "Hello?" Elijah said politely. "A full tank, please." "Sure thing, soldier." The man was a bit cold but respectful. "Where are you from?" "East, heading west." Elijah preferred not to give too many details. Outside, Shadow sat by the pickup watching the street. His ears were perked up, his nose in the air. Something bothered him. At that moment, voices rose from the center of town, shouting, arguing. Elijah looked up. "What's going on?" he asked the shopkeeper. The man frowned. "The Jackson family again. Their son Marcus is always getting into trouble. This time he robbed the Wilsons' store." Elijah felt a tightness in his chest. "Stealing?" "Yes, a 17-year-old black boy. His family are good people, actually, but their children—" The man shrugged. Elijah paid the money and went outside. Sounds were approaching. A group of people had gathered in the middle of the main street. Right in the middle, a large white man, about 45 years old with red hair, had grabbed a young black boy by the arm. "I saw you," the red-haired man shouted. "You were rummaging through the cash register as you left my store." The young boy, Marcus Jackson, about 17 years old, thin but standing proudly, shook his head. "I didn't, Mr. Wilson. I swear I didn't." "Don't lie, kid." Wilson tightened his grip on his arm. $200 missing from the register." The crowd had gathered around Marcus, watching breathlessly, mostly white elderly people. They stared at the boy with judgmental eyes. "Let's call the police," said an old woman. "This is enough." "That's not true," Marcus whispered. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from anger. "I didn't steal anything, I just went to get some water." Shadow tensed beside Elijah. He let out a low growl. Elijah looked at him. His dog's nose was focused on the scent. He lifted his nose and sniffed the air. "Calm down, Shadow," Elijah murmured. But he was uncomfortable himself. This scene felt familiar to him. The swiftness of the accusations, the crowd's prejudice, the helplessness of a defenseless young man. Wilson held Marcus tightly, wanting to wait until the police arrived. "The kid's guilty, there was no one else in my shop." "But I was just." Marcus couldn't finish his sentence. No one was listening. Elijah stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said loudly. The crowd turned to him. "I witnessed this incident. The boy was just getting water." Wilson frowned. "Who are you?" "My name is Elijah Brooks, and I believe this boy is innocent." "What's it to you, stranger?" snapped Wilson. "I know what goes on in my store." Elijah remained calm. "I'm just seeking justice. Is there any evidence?" "Evidence?" Wilson laughed mockingly. "The cash register is short, and he was the only one in the store. What more evidence do you need?" The crowd sided with Wilson. "You're right, Bob," said one. "That's what these kids always do." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "If that's what he's supposed to do, how can I prove he didn't?" Elijah noticed Shadow's movements at that moment. The dog was focused on the store. His nose was in the air, following a specific scent. "Shadow," he said quietly. "What did you find?" The dog looked at him, then walked toward the store. Elijah followed him. "Where are you going?" Wilson shouted. "My dog has detected something," Elijah said. "He's a very well-trained police dog." This was a lie. Shadow wasn't a police dog, just Elijah's war buddy, but people's attention was diverted. Shadow went to the back of the shop. There, between the trash containers, he pressed his nose to the ground. He was sniffing very carefully, tracking something. "What's the dog doing?" asked Marcus, approaching Elijah. He's tracking, said Elijah. Shadow is very talented. If there's someone else here, he'll find them. Wilson and the crowd had followed them. This is ridiculous. Wilson shouted. Let the kid admit to the crime and be done with it. Shadow suddenly stopped. Next to the trash container, he was trying to look inside a small hole. He growled. Elijah bent down. What is it, Shadow? The dog tried to dig at the ground with its paw. Elijah pulled the trash can aside. Beneath it, in the dark soil, were several footprints. Fresh footprints. Whose are these? Elijah asked. Wilson approached. His face changed when he saw the footprints. These aren't my shoes. Marcus looked too. They're not mine either. I was wearing sneakers. Shadow continued to follow the footprints. They led away from the back door of the shop. They were heading towards the side street. Someone was wandering around behind your shop, Elijah said to Wilson. And Marcus went outside while he was inside. Wilson was stunned. But how is that possible? I locked the back door. Elijah examined the back door. There were scratches around the lock. Someone forced this lock. It was done very skillfully. Shadow continued to follow the tracks. He moved away from the main street and turned into a side street. There he stopped behind an old car and growled intensely. Elijah approached. Behind the car was a plastic bag. Inside were cash bills. $200, Elijah said after counting. The exact amount that was missing. The crowd looked on in shock. Wilson's mouth hung open. How is this possible? Said the old woman. Marcus's eyes lit up. So you really were innocent. But Elijah was thinking further. This money being here is no coincidence. Someone deliberately planned to frame Marcus. Who could do such a thing? Asked Wilson. Shadow was still following the trail. He sniffed the plastic bag, then turned in another direction. This time he walked with more determined steps. Shadow is following someone, Elijah said. The real thief. The dog led them out of the city to an area with small houses. There he stopped in the garden of a modest house. Whose house is this? Elijah asked. Wilson swallowed. This is my nephew's house. Tommy Wilson. Your nephew? Yes. 25 years old. Unemployed. Sometimes he asks me for money. Shadow walked to the door of the house and stopped there. He wagged his tail. The trail was complete. Where was your nephew today? Elijah asked. Wilson thought. I don't know, but he knows the key to my shop. He used to play there all the time when he was a kid. Just then the door opened. A tall blonde young man stepped out, Tommy Wilson. His face changed when he saw Elijah and the crowd. What's going on? He stammered. Shadow walked toward him and came up to his feet. Then he sat down and barked. He had found his target. Tommy, Wilson said slowly, what did you do today? Nothing, Uncle. I was just at home. Elijah looked at Tommy's shoes. They had mud and dirt on them. These shoes were worn outside last night. Tommy took a step back. Shadow followed you, Elijah said calmly. From behind the store to this house, and you hid the money. That's impossible, Tommy shouted. How could the dog? He stopped. He had given himself away. Wilson's face flushed with anger. Tommy, did you do it? Uncle, I needed money. And I thought... Tommy looked helpless. So I figured they'd blame that black kid anyway. The crowd was in shock. All the accusing eyes that had been on Marcus were now on Tommy. So you planned to frame my brother, Marcus said, his anger rising. You thought I would look guilty just because I'm black. Tommy hung his head. I'm sorry. Sorry? Marcus's voice trembled. You're going to apologize for judging me so harshly? Elijah stepped between them. Marcus, I understand your anger. But justice has been served. The real culprit has been found. Wilson looked at his nephew. Tommy, you'll wait here until the police arrive. And you'll pay back every penny. The crowd began to disperse. People walked away, their heads bowed in shame. They didn't dare look at Marcus again. Marcus turned to Elijah. Thank you. If it weren't for you, it's thanks to Shadow, Elijah said. He's our real hero. Shadow approached Marcus and licked his hand. The boy smiled, the first genuine smile of the day. Who are you? Marcus asked. And how is your dog so smart? Elijah hesitated. He didn't want to talk about his past. We're just travelers. Shadow is my best friend. But that night, staying at the town's only motel, Elijah fell into thought. This incident had reminded him of something. The importance of not staying silent in the face of injustice. Shadow seemed to understand him too. The dog lay at his feet, sensing they had stumbled upon a lucky day. But Elijah didn't know that this wasn't the only injustice in Millbrook. Greater, darker secrets awaited them. Early the next morning, Elijah woke up in the motel room and noticed Shadow was restless. The dog was sitting by the window, watching outside. His ears were pricked, his body tense. "What's up, buddy?" Elijah asked, getting up. Shadow looked at him, then turned back outside. Something was bothering him. Elijah went to the window. Outside in the motel parking lot, 2 police cars were parked. The officers were talking to the motel owner, occasionally glancing at Elijah's room. "Interesting," Elijah muttered. He knew the police had arrested Tommy Wilson after last night's incident. So why were they here? There was a light knock at the door. Elijah opened it. Standing there was Sheriff Deputy Carson, a serious-looking man of about 35. "Mr. Brooks? My name is Deputy Carson. We'd like to talk to you." "Sure," Elijah said. "What's the problem?" "We have some questions about last night's incident. Could you come to the station?" Elijah hesitated. "I'm just a temporary visitor." "I was trying to help. Yes, we know. But Tommy Wilson made some allegations. We want to clear them up." Shadow looked at Deputy Carson and growled softly. Elijah stroked his head to calm him. "Can I bring my dog?" "Sure, no problem." On the way to the station, Elijah felt the town's atmosphere change. People were looking at him, whispering. Yesterday he was seen as a hero. Today he was treated like a suspicious stranger. The station was small but clean. Sheriff Mitchell, about 50 years old, bald and pot-bellied, sat behind his desk, eyeing Elijah appraisingly. "Mr. Brooks," said the sheriff, "please sit down." Elijah sat down. Shadow crouched beside his feet. "Tommy Wilson said some interesting things this morning," the sheriff continued. "He said you planted that money there beforehand, that the whole thing was your plan." Elijah frowned. "That's nonsense. I came to this town for the first time last night." "How can you prove that?" "I have the gas receipt, credit card records, motel records." Deputy Carson looked at the file. "Yes, we checked those. You did arrive last night, but Tommy claims you knew Marcus Jackson beforehand." "That's not true." "I saw Marcus for the first time in my life yesterday." Sheriff Mitchell leaned forward. "Then how did your dog find the money so precisely, as if he knew beforehand?" Elijah took a deep breath. "Shadow is a trained dog. I have a military background, and he's been through a lot with me." "A military background?" The sheriff's eyes lit up. "Which unit?" "The 101st Airborne Division, 3 tours in Afghanistan." "Was Shadow in the army too?" "No, but he trained extensively with me. His sense of smell is highly developed." The sheriff silently looked at the records. "Mr. Brooks, Tommy Wilson is making serious accusations. He says you plan to stay in this town longer. You have other motives." "What motives?" "You're going to approach Marcus Jackson's family and try to use them." "To file a compensation lawsuit." Elijah was shocked. "That's completely made up. I only intervened because I saw injustice." Shadow suddenly stood up. He pricked up his ears, lifted his nose in the air. He walked toward the door and growled softly. "What is it?" asked the sheriff. Elijah looked at Shadow. The dog was pointing behind the door. "Someone's coming," said Elijah. "Shadow senses strangers." Just then the door opened. Marcus Jackson entered, followed by a middle-aged black woman, probably his mother. "I'm sorry," Marcus said breathlessly, "but I can't believe what I'm hearing." "Marcus," the sheriff said sternly, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here to defend Mr. Brooks," Marcus said firmly. "Tommy Wilson is lying." The woman next to Marcus, Grace Jackson, about 45 years old with a strong bearing, stepped forward. "I'm Grace Jackson, Marcus's mother. We've never seen this man in our lives until last night." "And he saved us last night," Marcus added. Tommy Wilson told his friends his plan. Everyone in town heard. Sheriff Mitchell frowned. "How so?" "Tommy told his friends last night at the bar when he was drunk. He said I was going to pin it on that black kid, then I'd have the money." "But that damn dog ruined everything," Grace Jackson chimed in. Half the town heard. Tommy confessed everything already. Deputy Carson looked at the sheriff. "If that's true, we have no reason to accuse Mr. Brooks." The sheriff looked relieved. "All right, Mr. Brooks, we apologize. We had to check Tommy's claims." Elijah stood up. I understand. You're doing your job. But Shadow was still tense. The dog looked at the sheriff, sensing something. As they left the station, Marcus approached Elijah. Thank you. You protected me again. It's normal, Marcus. No one should see innocent people accused. Grace Jackson joined them. Mr. Brooks, you're invited to dinner. We don't know how to thank you. Elijah hesitated. Actually, I was planning to hit the road. Please, said Marcus. Stay at least one more night. The town owes you a lot. Shadow approached Marcus and licked his hand. That was enough of a sign for Elijah. All right, I'll stay one more night. That evening, there was a warm atmosphere at Jackson's house. The house was small but clean, a loving family home. Grace's husband, Robert, a man in his 50s with hard-working hands, had come home early from work for dinner. Were you in the military? Robert asked Elijah. Yes, 3 tours in Afghanistan. Tough times, Robert said sympathetically. I was in Vietnam. So I understand. Shadow lay under the dining table, resting against Marcus's feet. The boy continued to pet the dog. How did Shadow get so smart? Marcus asked. Long story, Elijah said. But he saved my life many times. During dinner, Robert told some town stories. Millbrook used to be a beautiful place. But things have changed in recent years. How so? Elijah asked. Grace and Robert exchanged glances. Grace hesitated. There are some injustices, especially for families like ours. You're not the first, said Robert. Last year another young man was accused. Samuel from the Jackson family. They live in this town too. Marcus looked up. Samuel's my cousin. They accused him unfairly too. What did they accuse him of? Asked Elijah. Car theft, said Grace. But Samuel was at home at the time. He was watching TV with us. Robert sighed. But no one listened. They said a black kid must be guilty. Shadow suddenly raised his head. His ears perked up. The sound of a car could be heard outside. Elijah looked out the window. Outside, under the streetlight, a dark car was parked. Someone was sitting inside watching the house. Whose car is that? Elijah asked. Robert came to the window. I don't know. Who would come at this hour? Shadow stood up and walked toward the door. He began to growl softly. Shadow senses someone, Elijah said. We're being watched. Marcus looked out the window too. Everyone knows everyone in this town. That car is unfamiliar. Just then the car started its engine and drove away. Shadow growled a little more, then calmed down. Strange, said Grace. We've been seeing cars like that a lot lately. What cars? Asked Elijah. Foreign license plates. Always black cars. They drive around town, but no one knows them. Robert was thoughtful. Maybe they're investigating something. A new company, perhaps. But Elijah thought differently. His military experience told him otherwise. Surveillance, observation, gathering information. Later that night, back at the motel, Elijah was deep in thought. What was happening in this town was no coincidence. There was a systematic pattern. The targeting of black youths, the surveillance by foreign cars, Tommy Wilson's sudden accusations. Shadow was restless too. He paced back and forth in the dog room, occasionally going to the window to check outside. You feel it too, don't you, Shadow? Elijah said. Something's not right here. The dog looked at him and gave a soft bark, as if in agreement. Late that night, Shadow suddenly woke up and ran to the door. Elijah woke up too. The dog had started growling softly. Elijah got up and looked out the window. There was nothing to be seen outside. But Shadow's reaction was clear enough. Someone was lurking around. Elijah quietly opened the door and looked outside. In the far corner of the parking lot, among the shadows, a silhouette was moving. Someone was circling his car. Shadow, be quiet, Elijah whispered. The dog immediately fell silent but remained alert. Elijah quietly went outside. He moved through the shadows, approaching the silhouette. The man was bent over, placing something under his pickup truck. Stop! Elijah shouted. The man sprang up with terrifying speed and began to run. Elijah gave chase, but the man was prepared. He jumped into a car waiting on the other side of the parking lot and disappeared into the night. Elijah turned back to his pickup truck. He checked under the car. There, inside a plastic casing, was a small electronic device. GPS tracking device, he muttered. He pulled it out and smashed it. Shadow came over and sniffed the device. The dog growled. This smell was familiar. Then Elijah understood. What was happening in this town was no coincidence. Someone was watching them, And this was part of something much bigger than Tommy Wilson's simple theft. The next morning, when he met Marcus, he explained the situation. A GPS tracking device. Marcus was surprised. But who would do such a thing? I don't know. But Shadow senses something, and there was a familiar scent on this device. Shadow, meanwhile, had lifted his nose in the air and was sniffing around. He started walking toward the end of the street. "Let's follow him," Elijah said. Shadow led them to the edge of town, to the old industrial area. There was a large warehouse there. Several black cars were parked around the warehouse. "What's in that warehouse?" Elijah asked Marcus. "It used to be a packaging factory, but it's been empty for years." Shadow walked toward the warehouse but was very cautious. The dog sensed danger. Elijah examined the building. The windows were boarded up, but one was left open. Sounds were coming from inside. "There are people in here," Elijah whispered. Marcus listened. "I can hear voices talking." Shadow suddenly pulled back and growled. Someone was coming out from inside. "Hide," Elijah whispered. The depot door opened and 3 men came out. 2 were strangers, one was familiar. "Sheriff Mitchell, the sheriff," Marcus exclaimed in surprise. Elijah listened carefully, trying to hear what was being said. "The plan is changing," the sheriff said to the others. "That stranger is getting too involved. What are we going to do?" One of the men asked. "We'll get him out of town, somehow." Shadow detected a different scent at that moment. He began walking toward the back of the warehouse. There, in the area where the trucks were parked, were large metal crates. Elijah and Marcus followed him. When they got close to the crates, Shadow became even more uneasy. "What's in those crates?" Marcus whispered. Elijah tried to open one of the crates. It was locked, but the lock was weak. He found a stick and pried it open. When the box was opened, the sight inside shocked them. Hundreds of fake ID cards, passports, social security cards, and a notebook. It contained names, dates, plans. "What does this mean?" Marcus asked. Elijah opened the notebook. Inside were the names of various families in the town, including the Jackson family. Next to each name was the word target. "It's a list," Elijah said. "A target list. A target for what? I don't know. But this isn't just a fake document operation. It's something much bigger." Shadow suddenly pricked up his ears. Sounds were approaching. Someone had found them. "We have to get out of here," Elijah said. "Now." But it was too late. 3 men emerged from behind the warehouse, guns in hand. Sheriff Mitchell was at the front. "Mr. Brooks," the sheriff said coldly. "You're very curious." Elijah took Marcus behind him. Shadow stood in front of him, ready to bare his teeth. "What's going on in this town, Sheriff?" Elijah asked. The sheriff smiled. "Business." "Just business, Mr. Brooks. And you stuck your nose in it." That's when Elijah understood. Millbrook wasn't the innocent place it seemed. And what Shadow had found was part of a much larger, more dangerous network. Conflict was inevitable. If this story gives you hope, subscribe to stay with us. Share your thoughts in the comments. Shadow and Elijah's struggle will continue. Sheriff Mitchell's gun was pointed at Elijah. The other 2 men were watching Marcus and Shadow. They were trapped between the metal crates behind the warehouse. "You're a curious one, Mr. Brooks," said the sheriff with a cold smile. "You chose to stay here after Tommy Wilson's little theft." Elijah tried to remain calm. His military training kicked in. "I was just seeking justice, Sheriff. Justice." The sheriff laughed. "In this town, justice is whatever I say it is." Shadow tensed at Elijah's feet. The dog was ready to attack, but waited for Elijah's command. Marcus whispered from behind. "Mr. Brooks, what do we do?" "Stay calm, Marcus," Elijah replied slowly. His eyes were on the sheriff, but he was also scanning his surroundings. He was looking for escape routes. "I have a proposal for you, Mr. Brooks," said the sheriff. "Leave this town, as if you never came. Forget what you saw, and no harm will come to you. And if I refuse?" The sheriff shrugged. "Then you'll have a very unfortunate accident." "You and this nosy young man," Elijah turned his gaze to the crates. "Is this a fake document operation?" "How long have you been running it?" 5 years, said the sheriff proudly. "We had a flawless system, until you came along. What part of the system is here?" One of the men next to Sheriff Mitchell, tall, dark-haired, stepped forward. "Millbrook is the perfect cover town. No one suspects. Fake IDs are distributed from here to the whole country, and you distract attention by targeting black families," Elijah said. Marcus, Samuel, who else? You're very clever, the sheriff said. Yes, sometimes we create local scandals. We divert the media's attention elsewhere. Marcus trembled with rage. So accusing us and ruining our lives was just part of your game. Sorry, kid, said the sheriff sarcastically. But business is business. Shadow suddenly pricked up his ears. The dog had heard something else. The sound of cars in the distance. And they were getting closer. Your friends are coming, Elijah said to the sheriff. No, the sheriff said, frowning. No one should be coming at this hour. Just then, sounds rose from in front of the warehouse. The sound of brakes screeching, doors slamming, footsteps running. Federal agency. Hands above your head, Elijah smiled inwardly. Last night, when he found the GPS device, he had made an anonymous tip to the FBI, to an agent friend he knew from his military past. Sheriff Mitchell's face turned pale. That's impossible. I took pictures of the fake documents Shadow found and sent them to the FBI, Elijah said calmly. They work very fast. Federal agents rushed to the back of the warehouse, just in time. The sheriff's men lowered their guns and raised their hands. Sheriff Mitchell, said the lead agent, a serious-looking woman in her 40s. Agent Sarah Torres, FBI, you're under arrest. The sheriff gritted his teeth. This isn't over, Brooks. It's over for you, Elijah replied. After the FBI agents arrested the sheriff and his men, Agent Torres approached Elijah. Mr. Brooks, your tip helped us take down a huge operation. How big was this operation? They were operating in 19 states. Millions of dollars in counterfeit document trafficking. Millbrook was just one of the hubs. Marcus looked stunned. Our little town was the center of such a major crime. Unfortunately, yes, said Agent Torres. They usually prefer small, inconspicuous places. Shadow came over to Elijah and wagged his tail. The dog understood the job was done. Without Shadow, these criminals would never have been caught, Elijah said, petting his dog. Agent Torres smiled. Your dog is very talented. He could have been very valuable to our FBI K9 unit. Thank you, but Shadow is a retired soldier. He deserves a peaceful life. That evening, there was a big celebration at Jackson's house. Not only Marcus's family had come, but also the honest people of the town. Everyone was thanking Elijah. Grace Jackson came out of the kitchen with a large cake in her hands. Mr. Brooks, this town owes you a great deal. I just did what was right, Elijah said modestly. Robert Jackson stood up. I'd like to say a few words. Mr. Brooks, you came here by chance. But when you arrived, you saw injustice and you didn't stay silent. The crowd applauded. More importantly, Robert continued, you had a special friend like Shadow, and together you saved this town. Shadow sat next to Marcus, enjoying the attention from the child. But this story doesn't end here, said Grace, because the FBI gave us more information. Elijah looked curiously. What do you mean? Agent Torres entered the room. Mr. Brooks, we didn't tell you the whole story. This operation wasn't limited to counterfeit document production. What else was there? Human trafficking. People were being kidnapped using fake documents. Especially young people. Marcus's face changed. So there were other reasons they targeted us? Unfortunately, yes. That's why Marcus, Samuel, and the other young people were on the list. They were going to frame them and separate them from their families. Everyone in the room froze, but thanks to Shadow and Elijah, said Agent Torres, their plans fell through. We stopped their operations not just in this town, but across the entire country. Grace Jackson looked at Elijah with tears in her eyes. You saved my son. You saved all of us, said Robert. Late that night in the motel room, Elijah and Shadow sat quietly. The dog had calmed down. The danger had passed. Good job, Shadow, Elijah said, petting his dog. None of this would have been possible without you. Shadow wagged his tail and rested his head on Elijah's lap. We'll hit the road tomorrow, Elijah continued. But this place will always be special to us. The next morning, as they left town, a crowd had gathered on the main street. Marcus, his family, and the town's honest citizens had come to see them off. Thank you, Mr. Brooks, said Marcus. You were like a hero. I'm no hero, Marcus. Just a citizen who won't stay silent in the face of injustice. Shadow, too, added Marcus, petting the dog. He's a real hero, Shadow wagged his tail. He felt the town's love for him. Grace Jackson stepped forward. We have a gift. She handed Elijah a small package. Inside was a handmade necklace with a small dog figurine. "This is for Shadow," said Grace. "A promise we'll never forget him." Elijah placed the necklace around Shadow's neck. The dog puffed out his chest proudly. As they got into the pickup, Marcus approached one last time. "Mr. Brooks, if you ever come back this way." "If I do, I'll be sure to stop by," Elijah said with a smile. As they drove away from the town, Shadow turned to look out the back window. People were still waving. "We met good people, Shadow," Elijah said, "and we managed to protect them." Along the way, Elijah fell deep in thought. This adventure had reminded him of something important. As long as there was injustice in the world, there would be a need for people to try to stop it. Shadow felt the same way. The dog looked out the window, thinking about their next adventures. "You know, Shadow," Elijah said, "maybe we're not just traveling to escape. Maybe we're traveling to find the people we need." Shadow looked at him and barked, as if to say yes. As they drove down the main road, Elijah turned on the radio. The news was on. In an operation carried out yesterday by the FBI, a network of forged documents and human trafficking was dismantled across 19 states. The tip that led to the operation came from the small town of Millbrook in Montana. According to local sources, the criminal gang was caught thanks to evidence found by an anonymous veterinarian visiting the town and his dog. Elijah turned down the radio. "Did you hear that, Shadow?" "They said anonymous veterinarian." Shadow wagged his tail. "He didn't care about being famous, you're right," Elijah said. "What matters is helping, not gaining fame." That afternoon, in the small town where they stopped for gas, Elijah was reading the newspaper when a story caught his eye. Missing child sought in Arizona. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez disappeared from in front of her home last week. Elijah read the story. He looked at the child's photo. An innocent little girl wearing a pink dress, smiling. Shadow looked at the newspaper and pricked up his ears. Then he looked at Elijah and barked. "Do you feel it too, Shadow?" Elijah said. "Do we have another mission?" The dog ran to the car and stood by the door, ready to go. Elijah smiled. "All right, buddy. We're going to Arizona." As the pickup headed toward Arizona, Elijah continued listening to the news on the radio. The Millbrook operation had reverberated across the country. The dismantling of the human trafficking ring had led to the rescue of hundreds of innocent people. "You know, Shadow," Elijah said, "maybe this is our real mission, to be the voice for those who can't speak for themselves." Shadow looked out the window. A new adventure awaited them. In the town of Millbrook in the evening, Marcus Jackson sat on his porch, gazing into the distance. He had his phone in his hand, but he wasn't calling anyone. "What are you thinking about?" asked his mother, Grace. "I'm thinking about Mr. Brooks," said Marcus. "And Shadow. What would have happened without them?" Grace sat down next to her son. "We're here because of them. And now we're safe. Mom, I want to be like them. I want to help people. How? I don't know. But I'll do something. I'll continue what Mr. Brooks started." Grace smiled. "Then let's study law at university. We need lawyers to uphold justice." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Yes, I'll do in court what Shadow and Mr. Brooks did." That night, the town of Millbrook slept peacefully. For the first time in a long while, they felt truly safe. Elijah and Shadow, traveling down the Arizona highway, were preparing for a new adventure. The missing child Emma was waiting for them. "Shadow," Elijah said, looking at his dog, "I guess we won't be out of work." The dog wagged his tail. Together, wherever injustice was, they were ready to fight it. As the sun set, the pickup truck drove toward Arizona. Inside were two heroes, a quiet veterinarian and his loyal dog, and a truth they would always remember. Remaining silent in the face of injustice is complicity in crime. The story was ending, but the fight continued. If Elijah and Shadow's courageous struggle has moved you, subscribe and stay with us. Don't miss the stories of heroes fighting injustice. Share in the comments which topics affected you the most. The sun was scorching in the Arizona desert. As Elijah's pickup truck entered downtown Phoenix, Shadow shifted restlessly in the back seat. The dog sensed the city smells, exhaust fumes, the heat of the asphalt, and the scent of thousands of people. "Calm down, Shadow," Elijah said. "This time it's a different mission. For the past 3 days, they had been following the Emma Rodriguez case. The 8-year-old girl had disappeared while riding her bike in front of her house. The police hadn't found her. The FBI hadn't gotten involved yet, and the family was desperate. When they parked in front of the Phoenix Police Department, Detective Maria Santos was waiting for them. She was about 35 years old, Hispanic, with a determined look in her eyes. "Mr. Brooks," Santos said as she approached. "My friend Agent Torres at the FBI mentioned you. I heard about your success in Millbrook." "Hello, Detective Santos. Shadow and I will do our best." Shadow sniffed Detective Santos and wagged his tail. He sensed she was sincere. "Can we talk to Emma's family?" Elijah asked. "Of course. They want to see you too." The Rodriguez family lived in a small but clean house. Carlos Rodriguez, a tired man in his 40s with working man's hands, met them at the door. "Mr. Brooks, please come in. My wife Maria is in a terrible state." Inside, Maria Rodriguez, in her 30s, her eyes swollen from crying, held photos of her daughter. "Emma is a very special child," Maria said, trembling. "She loves her bike. She rides around the same park every day." Elijah listened carefully. "Was anything different that day?" Carlos thought. "Actually, yes. When Emma came home, she said she saw businessmen. There were strange people in the park." "How strange?" "They were wearing suits, but there were no children with them in the park. They were just talking." Shadow wanted to go to Emma's room. The dog lifted his nose in the air, searching for the source of the scent. "Can Shadow pick up Emma's scent?" Elijah asked. Maria brought Emma's favorite teddy bear. Shadow sniffed it thoroughly and stored it in his memory bank. At the park, Shadow immediately got to work. He sniffed the grass, scanned the areas where children played. Emma's scent was still there, but faint. "She's been taken somewhere else," Elijah told Detective Santos. Shadow suddenly stopped. At the edge of the park, near the main road, he had detected a different scent. It was the smell of a car tire, but fresh. "Shadow has found something," Elijah said. The dog followed the roadside. There, among the bushes, was a small pink ribbon from Emma's hair. "This is definitely Emma's," said Maria, her eyes filling with tears. "She was taken from here by car," said Detective Santos. "But which car?" Shadow sniffed the ribbon again, then scanned the area. There were tire tracks on the asphalt and they had left a distinct scent. "Can Shadow follow this scent?" asked Detective Santos. "He can," said Elijah. "But we need to go by car." The chase continued toward Phoenix's outskirts. Shadow stuck his head out of the police car, following the scent. Occasionally he stopped and gave signals to change direction. "Unbelievable," said Detective Santos. "How can he follow it so precisely?" "Shadow's nose is more sensitive than our eyes," Elijah said. To him, scents are like a colorful map. When they reached the industrial area, Shadow became even more excited. He stopped in front of an old auto repair shop between large warehouses. "Here," Elijah said. "Emma is here." Detective Santos grabbed his radio. "I need backup." Suspect location found. As they surrounded the repair shop, they heard a child's voice inside, a crying voice. "Emma!" Detective Santos shouted. When they forced open the door, they found Emma in a small room at the back of the repair shop. The girl was scared but unharmed. "Mommy!" Emma cried as she threw herself into Maria's arms. But the criminals had escaped. Only Emma was left in the repair shop. "Did anyone see them?" Detective Santos asked. Shadow was circling the repair shop looking for other clues. On the ground next to a trash can he found a business card. "What's this?" Detective Santos asked. The business card read Western Union Labor Rights Consulting. "Strange," said Elijah. "What could Labor Rights Consulting have to do with kidnapping children?" Detective Santos examined the card. "I'll look into it." After Emma was returned home, Detective Santos called Elijah. "Mr. Brooks, I found some very interesting information. Western Union isn't just a labor rights consultancy. They're also in the business of breaking labor strikes." "How so?" "They take money from big companies and intimidate striking workers. Emma's father, Carlos, organized a major construction strike last month." Elijah understood. They tried to intimidate Carlos by kidnapping Emma. "Exactly. But thanks to Shadow, their plan fell apart." "Fight for your rights," Elijah said. "Emma will learn what that means." Emma came over to Shadow. She petted the dog. "Shadow saved me," she said lovingly. Shadow wagged his tail. He had saved another innocent life. 2 days later, as Elijah and Shadow were leaving Phoenix, there was a news report on the radio. Construction workers won their strike. The employer agreed to a settlement on workers' rights. Strike leader Carlos Rodriguez announced the fight would continue. "Did you hear that, Shadow?" Elijah said. Carlos won for the rights. Saving Emma was just the beginning. Shadow was looking out the window. The road was calling them. When Elijah's phone rang, he was filling up at a gas station in Nevada. The caller was an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Brooks? My name is Janet Miller. I'm calling from Chicago. We really need you. What happened? My husband was a witness to a workers' strike. Now he's missing. The police aren't helping. The FBI hasn't gotten involved yet. But I heard your story. Please help." Elijah looked at Shadow. The dog was listening intently. "What's her husband's name?" "Robert Miller. He worked at the steelworks factory. He was organizing the strike. Then one night he left home and never came back." "When did this happen?" 5 days ago. "He left his phone at home. His car is still here. It's like he vanished into thin air." Shadow looked at Elijah and barked. The dog understood a new mission had begun. "What's the address?" Elijah asked. After hanging up the phone, he looked at the Millbrook necklace around Shadow's neck. The small dog figure sparkled in the sun. "Shadow," Elijah said, "I guess our work is never done." The dog wagged its tail. Together, wherever injustice was, they were following it. As the pickup headed towards Chicago, Elijah thought, a forged document gang in Millbrook, child abductions in Phoenix, now a missing witness in Chicago. Different cities, different crimes, but the same theme, injustices against the powerless. "You know, Shadow," Elijah said, "maybe God is leading us down these paths. Maybe this is our true mission." Shadow was looking out the window. Chicago's skyscrapers were visible on the horizon. "New city, new mission," Elijah continued. "But you and me, Shadow, always together." The dog looked at him and barked as if to say yes. As they drove toward Chicago, Elijah listened to the news on the radio. The Millbrook operation was still in the headlines. Marcus Jackson had appeared on television, speaking about fighting injustice. "Shadow, did you hear Marcus? That kid has really changed. He's going to study law." Marcus's voice on the radio. "Mr. Brooks and Shadow taught us that remaining silent in the face of injustice is complicity in crime. I want to be like them. I will defend justice in the courts." Elijah smiled proudly. "Good kid. The future is in his hands." When they arrived in Chicago that afternoon, Janet Miller was waiting for them. She was about 45 years old, looking worried, but a strong woman. "Mr. Brooks, thank you so much for coming. I hope you can find Robert." When Shadow got out of the car, he immediately scanned the surroundings. The smells of the big city, factory smoke, car exhaust, the scent of millions of people filled his nose. "Shadow, can you pick up Robert's scent?" Elijah asked. Janet brought Robert's most frequently worn shirt. Shadow sniffed it carefully. He stored the scent in his memory bank. "Where do we go now?" asked Janet. "Where was Robert last seen?" asked Elijah. "At the workers' meeting in front of the steelworks factory. He was going to announce the strike decision." "Then let's start there." At the factory gate, Shadow immediately picked up Robert's scent. The dog pressed his nose to the ground and began tracking. "Here," said Elijah. Robert was definitely here. Following the trail, Shadow moved away from the factory and entered a side street. There he stopped between the trash containers and growled. "What is it?" asked Janet. Elijah checked the trash container. Inside was Robert's jacket. "This is Robert's," said Janet, her eyes filling with tears. "But where is he?" asked Elijah. Shadow was still growling. The dog sensed something else. Just then, a voice called out from behind them. "Did you find what you were looking for?" When they turned around, 3 men were watching them. They were dressed in suits, their faces serious. "Who are you?" Elijah asked. "Security," said one of the men. "What are you doing in this area?" Shadow tensed up. He could smell Robert on these men. "We're looking for Robert Miller," Janet said. The men exchanged glances. "Miller? He's not around here anymore." "Where?" Elijah asked sharply. "He moved to another city," the man said mockingly. "He doesn't care about the strike anymore." Shadow made a sudden move. He sniffed one of the men's shoes and growled. Elijah understood Shadow's signal. "You've encountered Robert." The men backed away. "We didn't run into anyone." "Shadow knows you," Elijah said calmly but threateningly. "He smells Robert on you." The leader of the men panicked. "We're just security. We don't know anything." "Then there's no problem," Elijah said. "We'll leave. But the police will use Shadow's nose to track them." That was enough. The men quickly walked away. "Did they take Robert?" Janet asked. "Definitely," Elijah said. "Now we need to find out where he's being held." Shadow started tracking again. This time he was much more determined. The scents were fresh. The trail led to the outskirts of Chicago to an old industrial area. There was a large warehouse complex there. Shadow stopped in front of the warehouse and barked. "Here," said Elijah. "Robert is here." Janet wanted to call the police, but Elijah stopped her. "Let's make sure Robert is really here first." Shadow led them to the back of the warehouse. There, looking through a small window, they saw Robert Miller. He was tied to a chair but unharmed. "Robert," Janet whispered. Robert lifted his head. His eyes lit up when he saw his wife. Elijah called the police. 20 minutes later, Robert was rescued. The kidnappers were arrested. "They were the factory owner's men," said Robert. "They kidnapped me to stop the strike." "They can't stop it now," said Janet, hugging her husband. Shadow wagged his tail contentedly. Another mission accomplished. As Elijah and Shadow left Chicago, Robert's words echoed in his ears. "Mr. Brooks, thanks to you, it wasn't just me who was rescued. All the workers' rights were protected. The strike will win." "This is just the beginning, Robert," Elijah had said. "Wherever there is injustice, we will try to stop it." Now, as they drove along, Elijah thought about the future. The forged document gang in Millbrook, the child abductions in Phoenix, the workers' rights in Chicago. Different cities, but the same struggle. Shadow looked out the window, imagining their next assignments. "You know, Shadow," Elijah said, "this is our way of life now. Traveling, helping people, fighting injustice." The dog looked at him and barked. As if in agreement, as the sun set, the pickup pulled onto the main road. Inside were two heroes, a quiet veterinarian and his loyal dog. And there was one truth they would always remember. Wherever there is injustice, there must be someone to stop it. Elijah and Shadow's story continued like this. In every new city, every new mission, as bearers of hope and justice, and the future was filled with heroes like them. Marcus would study law in Chicago. Emma would become a strong young woman in Phoenix. Carlos would continue to defend workers' rights. The story of those who did not remain silent in the face of injustice continued. Shadow and Elijah didn't know what awaited them at the end of the road. But they knew one thing. Wherever there was injustice, they would go and stop it because that was their mission. That was the meaning of their lives, and the story will continue. Elijah and Shadow's fight against injustice continues. If the story of these two brave souls has touched you, subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments which issues of injustice affect you the most. And remember, each of us can speak out against injustice just like Elijah. With Shadow's courage, we can make a difference in the society we live in.